What moments in your life have made you read documents or agreements before signing? Tell us what you learned that you would never have noticed if you had just signed without looking. A friend once gifted me an art commission and handed me a document to sign. As I read it, I realized I was agreeing to let the artist use my likeness for promotional purposes indefinitely. When I questioned it, they admitted that it was standard, but removed it when I pushed back. Saved myself from becoming an accidental spokesperson. Once, I was starting a new job and got a big stack of onboarding papers to sign. Most people just skimmed through, but I decided to actually read it. In the contract, I found a clause that said I would be on a probationary period for 2 years. During that time, they could cut my pay or fire me without any notice. When I asked HR about it, they admitted it was standard, but they changed it to 6 months because I caught it. Definitely a win for taking my time to read. At a new job, I almost signed an agreement that looked standard until I saw a clause about intellectual property. It said that anything I created outside of work hours still belonged to the company if it was related to their industry. I made them remove it before signing. Who knows what kind of mess that could have caused if I'd started a side project. My friend wanted to lease a horse for recreational riding. The lease agreement looked simple, but I helped her read it. It included a clause stating that if the horse got sick or injured during the lease, she'd have to cover all medical costs, even if it wasn't her fault. That could have been thousands of dollars. She confronted the owner and walked away when they refused to negotiate. My local bank offered me a special promotion for opening a savings account. The brochure said I'd earn 2% interest, but the terms they handed me mentioned 0.02%. When I pointed it out, the teller didn't even realize the discrepancy. They had to honor the advertised rate, and I ended up getting an amazing deal because I took the time to compare what I read with what they handed me. While buying a concert ticket online, I noticed a checkbox for agreeing to terms and conditions. Out of curiosity, I opened it. Buried in the document was a policy stating they could cancel tickets without refunds if the buyer resold them, even to friends. I decided not to risk it and bought directly from the venue instead. A friend who bought through the same site ended up losing her tickets for sharing them on social media. I almost signed up for a free trial gym membership, but I read the fine print first. The terms actually stated that after the trial period, they'd lock you into a full-year contract unless you cancelled 24 hours before the trial ended. And the cancellation could only be done in person during office hours. I quickly backed out and realized that free really does come at a price sometimes. During a home loan application, the banker handed me a form and said it was a routine document confirming my details. But when I read it, I found a clause that gave them permission to contact my employer about my financial habits. I asked why they needed that, and they had no answer, so I refused to sign. Later, another applicant told me the bank actually contacted her boss to discuss her debts. After buying a used car from a dealer, I was about to sign the final paperwork when I noticed a small line about a reconditioning fee of $500. When I questioned it, they acted like it was standard, but I told them I wouldn't sign unless it was removed. Turned out, it wasn't required at all. They were just trying to pocket a little extra cash. I ended up getting the car for $500 less than expected. I joined a local gym, and the trainer asked me to sign a waiver. I decided to skim it, and to my shock, it included a line saying they weren't responsible for injuries caused by poorly maintained equipment. Basically, if I got hurt because a machine broke, it was on me. I questioned it, and the staff reluctantly admitted their equipment was outdated. I left and found a better gym. I once went to sign up for a trial membership at a local co-working space. The contract looked standard, but I noticed a clause that stated they could use photos taken in the space for marketing purposes. It didn't seem too bad until I realized it included hidden cameras. Basically, anything I worked on in the space could be photographed without consent. I walked out immediately and reported them. Later, I heard they got sued for invasion of privacy. When my partner and I were getting married, the venue gave us a rental agreement with a section that said any damages, no matter how small, would be covered by the party hosts. Basically, if a guest broke a glass or a chair, we'd be paying a premium to replace it. We negotiated it down to only major damage. I'm glad I caught that clause, because sure enough, one of our guests managed to break 3 glasses. I was signing a rental car agreement on a trip, and something about the fine print caught my eye. Turns out they had a clause where I'd be charged for missing fuel, even if the car was returned with a full tank. When I asked about it, the agent admitted they didn't always double-check the tank and encouraged me to pay extra for their fuel option. I cancelled the booking and went with another company. A photographer offered me a free engagement photo shoot, but I decided to actually read the contract first. Turns out, I'd have to pay $500 to unlock the digital versions of the photos and couldn't even print them without buying a license. When I called them out, they backtracked and said it was standard practice. I declined, found someone else, and saved myself a big headache. I once received a job offer and got the employment agreement via email. While reviewing it, I noticed a tiny clause that stated I'd have to pay back all training costs if I left within the first year, about $15,000. The kicker? They could fire me without notice and still demand repayment. I flagged it with HR, and they admitted it was a standard clause. But I refused to sign until it was removed. Best decision ever. 3 months later, the company shut down. A company sent me an NDA to sign before discussing a potential partnership. As I read through it, I discovered a hidden clause stating that by signing, I agreed to a non-compete with them for 5 years, regardless of whether we worked together or not. I refused to sign, and they tried to pressure me, but I stood my ground. A few months later, another partner told me they signed the same thing and had to pay penalties for launching their own business. At a theme park, they handed me a waiver before letting me on a ride. It seemed normal until I noticed a part that said they weren't liable for injuries, even if caused by staff negligence. When I refused to sign, they tried to assure me it was just a formality, but I walked away. A week later, I saw a news report about someone getting injured on the same ride. Dodged a bullet there. I was applying for a business credit card, and they handed me a 30-page agreement. Buried deep within was a dynamic interest rate clause that allowed them to increase my interest rate by up to 15% without notifying me. I would have been stuck paying an arm and a leg if I hadn't caught it and decided to go with a different bank. My apartment lease renewal had a sneaky rent increase clause hidden halfway through the document, which would take effect if I signed without requesting a review. When I asked them to explain, they tried to downplay it, but ultimately gave me the same rate as before. While refinancing my mortgage, I found a clause stating that the lender could sell my loan to another company without notifying me. This meant I could end up dealing with an entirely different bank. I pushed back and made them remove it before signing. Sure enough, the company sold half their loans 6 months later, but mine stayed with them. A friend's wedding venue tried to sneak in a clause saying any vendors not approved by them would incur a $500 penalty. This wasn't in the initial contract. We confronted them and they said it was updated recently. We made them revert to the original terms and saved hundreds of dollars by bringing in our own caterer. I was adopting a dog from a shelter, and they gave me a standard adoption form. Something felt off, so I read it carefully and discovered that they could take the dog back at any time if they felt my living conditions were unsuitable. I asked them to clarify what that meant, and their response was vague. It's up to our discretion. I found another shelter with clearer policies, and it worked out much better. While booking a flight, I was asked to sign a liability waiver for weather-related delays. Reading it closer, I realized they were also disowning responsibility for any delays caused by their own crew or maintenance issues. I called customer service, and they confirmed that if the delay was on them, I'd still be stuck paying any extra costs. I cancelled my booking and went with a more reputable airline. My university offered a scholarship with a lengthy contract. I went through every clause and found a condition that if I dropped below a 3.5 GPA for even one semester, I'd owe them the entire amount back with interest. Since I knew my major would get tougher, I decided to turn down the scholarship and take a part-time job instead. I avoided a mountain of debt just by reading the fine print. Thanks for watching. If these stories have taught you something, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your stories in the comments. What interesting point did you find when you read something before signing off?